We continue now at the top of Daf 11b Meseches Megillah. This is Megillah Daf 11b. On the previous summit, the Gemara says there were three people that ruled over the entire world. And so now the Gemara asks, V'su Lekar, were there no other people? V'ha'ika Shlomo, but what about Shlomo HaMelech? He ruled over the entire world. So the Gemara says, Lo Solik Malchusa, he wasn't able to finish, to complete his kingship. As Rashi over here says, Lo Solik Malchusa, Lo Hishli Malchuso, Shahari Nitrat, at the end of his kingship, he lost his kingship. Meseches Gittin. That's what we say, Meseches Gittin, that's why we don't count him. The Gemara says, Hanich Lamando Amar Melech v'Hedyot. That works according to the one who says that he was a king, and then he ended off as a Hedyot, as a regular person. Elulamando Amar Melech v'Hedyot v'Melech. But there's another Mandamar that says he was a king, then he became a Hedyot, and then he became a king again. So Ma'ikol Amemar. So what are you going to say? In that case, it was Solik Malchuse. He did finish off his kingdom. And so the Gemara answers, Shlomo Milsa Achrisi Havabe. Shlomo HaMelech, there was something else about Shlomo HaMelech. Shemalach Al Elyonim v'Al Tachtonim, because he was king over the upper worlds. Rashi over here says Al Elyonim means Al Hashedim, on the demons. And also Al Tachtonim, also on this world. Shenemar, like the Pasuk says, Vayeshev Shlomo Al Kisei Hashem. It says he was on the throne of Hashem. And the Gemara continues, V'ohava Sancheriv, but didn't Sancheriv rule over the entire world? T'chsiv, like the Pasuk says, Mi b'chol Elohei ha'aratza sa'ela, asher hitzilu es arza miyadi. Are there any gods from any of these lands that have been able to protect their territory from me? And so the Gemara says, Ha'ika Yerushalayim, no, there was Yerushalayim, the lo kavsha. Sancheriv was not able to conquer Yerushalayim. And the Gemara continues, Va'ika Daryavish, but what about Daryavish? Didn't he rule over the entire world? D'chsiv, like the Pasuk says, Daryavish malka ksav l'chol amamayu umayu v'lishnaya di dairin b'chol ara shal mechon yiskei. It says he wrote the letter to all the nations, indicating that he ruled over all the nations of the world. And so the Gemara says, no, Ha'ika Shvad lo malach alayo. There were 7 nations that he did not rule over. D'chsiv, like the Pasuk says, Shvar kodam Daryavish, ve'ekiv al malchus ala achashtar penaya, meyo ve'esrin. It says there were 120 nations. And again, like we saw before, there were 127 provinces that Achashverosh ruled over. That indicates there were 7 that Daryavish did not rule over. And the Gemara continues, Va'ika Koresh, but wasn't there Koresh? D'chsiv, like the Pasuk says, Ko amar Koresh melech pras, kol mamlochos ha'oretz nasan li Hashem. It says that Koresh says, he was the king of Persia, he says, all of the kingdoms, they're given to me by Hashem. And so the Gemara says, Hasam over there, over there, he was boasting about himself that he had all the kingdoms of the earth that were given to him, but in reality it was not true. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots, by Yomim Mohim Kesheves HaMelech, it says, in those days, as the king was sitting on his throne, but then it says, after Bishnas Shalosh L'Molcho, that the opening events of Megillah Esther took place in the 3rd year of his kingdom. In other words, that first pasuk, Kesheves HaMelech, sounds like it's taking place in the 1st year of his kingdom, and yet the pasuk says right after the 3rd year, so what's going on? So the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Mai Kesheves. What does it mean, Kesheves? It means La'achar shenisyash v'dayetu. It means after his mind was settled. Amar, because he said to himself as follows. Achashverosh said to himself, Belshazzar choshev v'toah. Belshazzar tried to calculate how long was the 70 years until the second Beis HaMikdash would be built, and he made a mistake in his calculation. Anocha shivna v'lo ta'ina. But I'm going to make a calculation, and I will not make a mistake. And the Gemara now explains, Mahi, what is this referring to? What is this calculation of the 70 years? D'chsiv, because the pasuk says, Ki lefi melos lebavel, shivim shana efkor eschem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, when the exile, the Babylonian exile is over after 70 years, that's when I'll remember you. That's when we'll bring you back for the second Beis HaMikdash. Uchsiv, and the pasuk also says, lemelos lechorvos Yerushalayim shivim shana. So it also says from the destruction of Yerushalayim 70 years. So Chashav, so he calculated as follows. This is referring to Belshazzar, made the following calculation. Arboin v'chomesh Nebuchadnezzar. There are 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar. V'esrim mutalos, and then there's 23 years the Evil Merodach of Evil Merodach. V'tarti didei, then you have 2 more years of Belshazzar. So if you add together the 45 and the 23 and 2 more, hashivim, that comes out to 70 years. So he figured the 70 years were up in his 2nd year, in Belshazzar's 2nd year, and he saw that there was no redemption yet. So apik money devei mikdash, so he took out the kalim of the Beis HaMikdash, v'yishtamash bu, and he used those kalim of the Beis HaMikdash. And Rashi over here explains, Kesheves HaMelech mashma b'tchilas malchusa, like we said, that implies the beginning of his kingdom, v'hadak b'shnas shalosh, then it says it happened in the 3rd year of his kingdom. So the Gemara answered, in the beginning he was worried. He thought the Jews would escape his rule. When the 70 years of the exile of Bavel would be over. Now in the 3rd year his mind was settled. He saw that the Jews were not redeemed. Ma'hi chushboni de Belshazzar v'ta'use. What was the calculation of Belshazzar? What was his mistake? So lefi melos leBavel. So one of the psukim there was when it completes for Bavel 70 years. Kisavar hu lemalchus Bavel. So he understood, Belshazzar understood, that we're calculating from the time of the kingdom of Bavel. Miyom shenot Bavel malchus, from the time that Bavel took control. Mezen Nebuchadnezzar not al malchus. That refers to Nebuchadnezzar. When did he take the kingdom? Me'asar chadon melech Ashur. He took it from the king of Ashur. So Chosha Belshazzar memhedu Nebuchadnezzar. So he calculated the 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar. V'chav gimel de Evel Merodach. He did the 23 of Evel Merodach. Betardi Didei, and then 2 more years of him. Deshkachan de Belshazzar Molach to Loshnin. We find he was king for 3. We find that he was king for 3 years. Dechsib Sefer Daniel b'shnas shalosh l'malchus Belshazzar Hamelech Chazon Nira Eli Ani Daniel v'Gomer. That's what it says. Talks about the 3rd year. And the Gemara continues in Nebuchadnezzar menolon da'arbin v'chomeshenin Molach. Now, how do we know that Nebuchadnezzar ruled for 45 years? The Omar Mar, because the master said, Golu b'sheva, Golu b'shmona, Golu b'shmona esrei, Golu b'tisha esrei. They were exiled in the 7th year, in the 8th year, in the 18th year, and in the 19th year. What does that mean? Golu b'sheva means they were exiled in the 7th year, l'kibush Yehoyakim. It means the 7th year from the conquest of Yehoyakim. Golus Yehoyachin, that was actually the exile of Yehoyachin. Shishmona Nebuchadnezzar, that actually took place in the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar. Rashi will explain this. And Golu b'shmona esrei l'chibush Yehoyakim. They were then exiled also in the 18th year to the conquest of Yehoyakim. Golus Tzidkio, that's what's called the exile of Tzidkio. Shehi tasha esrei l'Nebuchadnezzar. That is the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar. And Rashi over here explains, Golu b'sheva, Golu b'shmona. Chad Golusu, this is all referring to one exile. Ukroi Kodarish, we're just darshaning psukim. Ksiv v'Golus Yehoyachin, it says by the exile of Yehoyachin, b'shnas shmona l'malchus Nebuchadnezzar, b'sof Sefer Malachim. It says that Yehoyachin was exiled in the 8th year of the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar. That's what it says in Malachim. Over Sefer Yirmiyah b'sof, asher hegla Nevuzradon, b'shnas sheva. It says it's the 7th year, not the 8th year. So what does that mean? Elishmona l'malchus Nebuchadnezzar. What it means is as follows. It was the 8th year for the king Nebuchadnezzar for his kingdom. V'sheva l'kivash Yehoyakim. But it was actually the 7th year in terms of the conquest of Yehoyakim. Shekavshu ta'achta b'shana shniya l'malchuso. In other words, Yehoyakim was conquered in the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar. So that's why everything is 1 year less. It was the 7th year from the conquest of Yehoyakim. It was the 8th year of his kingdom. V'lo hegleyu, he didn't exile him. V'hi lo eved shalosh shanim, he was actually a servant to him for 3 years. V'yudches v'yudtes ksib b'golas Tzidkio. Similarly, it talks about the 18th year and the 19th year by the exile of Tzidkio. B'sof Sefer Yirmiyah, that's at the end of Sefer Yirmiyah. V'hainu churvos Yerushalayim, that was the destruction of Yerushalayim. Sheyuda alef shana achar golas Yehoyachin, that took place 11 years after the exile of Yehoyachin. Tichsiv, like it says in the pasuk, V'hi ba'ashtei esrei shana l'melech Tzidkio v'gomer u'ma yudches v'yudtes. Similarly, what does it mean 18 or 19? Yudches l'kivash Yehoyakim, it means it was 18 years from the conquest of Yehoyakim. V'yudtes l'malchus Nebuchadnezzar, which is the 19th year of the kingship of Nebuchadnezzar. And the Gemara explains, the Amar Mar, because the master said, Shana Rishona Kivesh Ninveh. For Nebuchadnezzar in his 1st year, he conquered Ninveh. As Rashi over here says, the Amar Mar Shana Rishona Kivesh Ninveh Shaisa Rosh Malchus Asher. That was the capital of the kingdom of Asher. Shaya Melech ben Ninveh. That the kingship there, that was in Ninveh. That's when he conquered Ninveh in the 1st year. Shniya Kivesh Yehoyakim. In the 2nd year, he conquered Yehoyakim. Uchsiv in the pasuk says, Vayhi b'shloshim v'sheva shana l'golas Yehoyachin. It says it was in the 37th year of the exile of Yehoyachin. Melech Yehuda, the king of Yehuda, b'shnei masar chodesh b'esrim v'chamisha l'chodesh, nasa Evel Merodach melech Bavel b'shnas malchuso, as Rosh Yehoyachin melech Yehuda. It says that Evel Merodach, the king of Bavel, he raised up Yehoyachin, vayotze osam mibeis hakel, and he took him out from the prison. And so the Gemara now calculates, Tamne, if you have again in the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar, that's when there was the exile of Yehoyachin. Utzlasin v'sheven, what did it say again in this pasuk? It said in the 37th year of the exile of Yehoyachin, that's when Evel Merodach brought up Yehoyachin. So therefore you have 37 plus 8. Harei arboin v'chamesh to Nebuchadnezzar. That comes out that there were 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, ve'esrun utlas to Evel Merodach. How do we know that Evel Merodach was king for 23 years? Gemara, that's a tradition. V'tarti didei, and then you have 2 more years of his own. Hashivin, that was the calculation of the 70 years. In other words, Belshazzar calculated the 70 years from the time of the beginning of the rule of Nebuchadnezzar. Amar, and he said, Hashtavadai sulo mifraki. At this point in time, 70 years is up, they're not going to be redeemed. Apik money, devei mikdash v'shtamish bo. I'm going to take out the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash and I'm going to use them. And the Gemara continues, Hainu dukamar le Daniel. That's what Daniel says to Belshazzar. Val mori shemaya hisromamtu lemonaya divesaya haisiv kadamach. It says you rebelled against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You took the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash. Uchsiv, and the pasuk says v'Daryavish mado kabel malchusa kebar shnin shisin v'tartin. It says that when Daryavish was about 62 years old, that's when he became the king. And the Gemara continues, Amar Achashverosh said to himself, "You mitatoy Belshazzar, he made a mistake in the calculation. I'm going to calculate and I won't make a mistake." Michsiv lemalchus Bavel, does it say that we're counting from the kingdom of Bavel, from the beginning of Nebuchadnezzar's reign? LeBavel ksiv, it says to Bavel. My LeBavel, what does it mean to Bavel? Legolus Bavel, it means to the exile that took place in Bavel. Kama betzira, and how much are we missing over here? Tamni, we're missing 8 years. Choshev va'ayel chilufayu, so therefore he calculated and he added the following years. Choda de Belshazzar, 1 year of Belshazzar. V'chomesh de Daryavish v'Koresh, he added 5 years of Daryavish and Koresh. Betarti Didei, he added 2 years of his own. Hashivin, that came out to 70 years. Kevan dechazi de malu shivin v'lo ifrik, when he saw the 70 years went by and they still weren't redeemed. Amar, he said, Hashtavadai sulo mifriki, they're certainly not going to be redeemed. Apik money de Beis Mikdash, so he took out the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash v'shtamish bu, and he used them. And Rashi over here explains, Anocha shivna legolus Bavel, Achashverosh said, I'm going to count from the exile of Bavel, meaning Tchilas Gola, the beginning of the exile. Shehiglas Yechonya, referring to the exile of Yechonya. Kama betzir mishivim, how many should we subtract from the 70 years? Mishnah shtayim lebelshazzar tamne, how many are you going to subtract? You're going to subtract 8. Osan shmona shanim, that refers to the 8 years shemolach Nebuchadnezzar lifnei hegluso as Yechonya, because it took 8 years from Nebuchadnezzar to exile Yechonya when he was king. Shalohoya lo lebelshazzar limnosa numanan, Belshazzar shouldn't have counted the first 8 years of Nebuchadnezzar, and he counted them. So now we have to add on these additional 8 years. So Choshav Achashverosh mi beis lebelshazzar at shalosh shelo. So now Achashverosh, instead of counting 2 years from Belshazzar, you have to add the third year also in the count. Va'ayel hanach tamni to chosayu, you have to put in these 8 years. Choda de Belshazzar, you got the one of Belshazzar, Darei Mishnah Shtayim Sholmo Shivim Shana, because again Belshazzar thought it was over in his second year, Lefi Minyano, according to his count. V'shuv Monashlisha, so you got to count the third year. That's your first additional year of the 8 years. V'chamisha de Daryavish Hamadi v'Koresh HaParsi, add another 5 of Daryavish and Koresh. Techsiv v'Daryavish Mado Kaval Malchusa v'Achrav Malach Koresh Harishon Shenosan Rishus Levnei Hagola Lalos. Koresh was the first. Koresh was the one that gave permission for the people of the exile to go up to Eretz Yisrael. Shenamar Koamar Koresh v'Gomer v'Kasal Gadai Dachashta Shemolchu Ben Shneim. Hey Shanim, right now we think that combined they had 5 years. Afagav the Lochsib B'Kroi, even though that's not written in the pasuk. Betarti Dachashverosh Kvarov Rulo Shtei Shanim, and then there was the first 2 years of the rule of Achashverosh that came out to the 70 years. So the Gemara continues. Ba Satan, the Satan came v'riked beinei, and he danced among them v'harages Vashti, and he killed Vashti to indicate that the calculation was wrong. But the Gemara continues, Vashapir Chasha, but then Achashverosh make the proper calculation. And so the Gemara says, Iu nami mitatoy, no, he also made a mistake. Di boile lemimne mechorvos Yerushalayim, he should have counted from the destruction of Yerushalayim. But the Gemara says, 1 second, sof, even if you're going to count from there, Kama Betzir, and how much is missing? Chad Sari, you're only missing 11 years. Iu Kama Molach, now how many years was Achashverosh king? Arbeisar, he was king for 14 years. But Arbeisar Didei, Boile, Lemivne Beis HaMikdash. So again, if we're in the 3rd year, we have to add another 11 years. So it should be in the 14th year they should have built the Beis HaMikdash. As Rashi over here explains, Mechorvos Yerushalayim, from the destruction of Yerushalayim, Golos Tzidkiyo, that refers to the exile of Tzidkiyo. Shenisr Fahir, that's when the city was burned. Uvo Behed Yaksiv, the Lechorvos Yerushalayim, Boile Mimne, Dechsiv B'Sefer Daniel, Melos Lechorvos Yerushalayim, Shivim Shana, from the destruction of Yerushalayim, you have to count 70 years. Chadeser Shekach Hamar Habayis, Achar Golos Yechonya. After the exile of Yechonya, there's another 11 years that the Beis HaMikdash stood. So Iu Kama Molech Arbeisar, now the Achashverosh had a total of 14 years. Dechsiv B'Shna Shtei Mesrei, Hipil Pur Hu HaGorel, it says in the 12th year, he made the lottery. Ulashona Acheres Nasa Haneis Hareyur Gimel, the next year, that was the miracle of Purim, that was the 13th year. The Malchi Umos Ha'olam Mitishrei Monin, and the nations, the kings of the nations of the world, they count their years from Tishrei. So it's a new year in Tishrei. Then it talks about the next year in the Megillah. That comes out to 14 years. That was 14 years that Achashverosh was king. So again, if you're going to add 11 years to his third year, so you should come out in his 14th year, the Beis HaMikdash should have been rebuilt. And the Gemara continues, so why does it say in the Pasuk, Beidayin Betelas Avidas Beis Allah Dib Yerushalem, that at that time they stopped construction on the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim? As Rashi over here explains, Beidayin Bimei Koresh Betelas Avidas Beis Allah. It was in the days of Koresh that they actually stopped building the second Beis HaMikdash. Shetziva Koresh Livnos. Originally Koresh said to build it. V'chazer Bal Yedei Tzara Yehudu V'Nyamin. But then they stopped because there were people who were oppressing Yehuda and Binyamin. They were making accusations against them. Like it says in Sefer Ezra, that was all the way until the second year of the kingdom of Daryavish, of the second Daryavish, and he was king after Achashverosh. He was called by three names, Daryavish, Koresh, and Artaxshasta. So in any case, the point is that the actual construction, according to that pasuk, the actual construction of the second Beis HaMikdash didn't take place until Daryavish Hasheni, after Achashverosh. But if you do the calculation according to what the Gemara just said, it should have been in the last year of Achashverosh. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Rava, Rava says, Shonim mikutos have. The situation over here is resolved by understanding that the years are incomplete years. As Rashi over here says, Shonim mikutos hayu osan shonim shemoninon lamala. When we did the count above, yesh bohen shenivlu, some of those years, so the last part of one year might be absorbed in the first year of the second set. Mishal acharon Barisha, like I just said, and the last one gets absorbed in the first one. Kagon l'Daryavish Hamadi v'Koresh. For example, by Daryavish and Koresh, Shemoninon lahem heishanim, we say it's 5 years. Lo simtzel adalid, maybe it's really only 4. You only find 4 years. Techsib b'shnas achas l'Daryavish ben Achashverosh b'Sefer Daniel. It talks about year 1 of Daryavish, the son of Achashverosh. B'shnas shalosh l'Malchus Koresh talks about the third year of Koresh. You add together 3 and 1, it's only going to be 4. B'Tanya b'Seder Olam l'Matzino l'Madai shana b'Chsuvim. Elazu bilvad. We don't find it except for this count, this count of 1 year when it came again to Daryavish. It just says this 1 year. Daryavish Hamadi had 1 year. Ula Koresh Matzino Shlosha, and by Koresh we find 3 years. Shnayim b'Sefer Daniel. We find twice in Sefer Daniel. B'Shnas Shalosh l'Malchus Koresh talks about again in the third year of Malchus Koresh. B'Tanyanami b'Seder Olam Koresh Molach Gimel Shanim Mikutos. It says also in Seder Olam that Koresh was king for 3 years, but they were incomplete years. Hare Shamon is Shana Yisera. So you see, you've really done an extra year over here. What you've done is you've calculated as 5 years, really is 4 years. V'gam devishnos Nebuchadnezzar v'Evel Merodach nivlo Shana. You could say the same thing by the years of Nebuchadnezzar and Evel Merodach. Maybe you're counting 1 year over there, really counts for both. The last year of Nebuchadnezzar and the first year of Evel Merodach is really all the same year. So if you do the calculation in that manner, and you're going to say again, the last year of Daryavish and the first year of Koresh is all 1 year, and if you're going to say the same thing over here, the last year of Nebuchadnezzar and the first year of Evel Merodach is also all 1 year, so you have another 2 years here that you have to add. That explains why the Beis HaMikdash wasn't built in the last year of Achashverosh, but rather was only built in the years of Daryavish, of the second Daryavish. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph.